Part 5. The City-State Theorem. The earliest geopolitical theory attempting to explain the world of SpongeBob was the City-State Theorem. It is unsurprising that many took to it, as the show is taking place almost entirely within the parameters of the city itself. There are few references to any kind of polity outside of Bikini Bottom, which seems to imply A. that Bikini Bottom is the most significant political force in its region, and B. that there is little or no interaction between the various undersea cities. Both of these points would lend credence to the theory. City-states evolved by annexing surrounding towns, forming in effect a single supercity. One of the defining marks of the evolution of the Greek city-state out of the ashes of the Dark Age was the emergence of a rich upper class, which was able to assert political control over a rapidly expanding population. We can see evidence of this in Theognidia, which supports the city-state theorem. Men today honor possessions, and elite men marry into bad families, and bad men into elite families. Riches have mixed up lines of breeding, and the good breeding of the citizens is becoming obscured. This text, written as a critique of contemporary Greek culture, bears a fascinating resemblance to the design of Mr. Krabs. Mr. Krabs, the most successful businessman in Bikini Bottom, is routinely portrayed as cheap, stingy, materialistic. Indeed, he once sold SpongeBob's soul for 62 cents. But these similarities are easily dismissed as superficial. What is so striking is the description Theognis gives of bloodlines of rich and elite families. The rich having mixed up lines of breeding falls exactly, startlingly, in line with the world building of Bikini Bottom. Mr. Krabs' daughter, after all, is a whale. Could this be a hint to audiences? A clever nod to Theognis' complaint of the Greeks of his day? Supporters of the city-state theorem will often assert that this is too specific to not be intentional, though not everyone is convinced. Where is Pearl's mother? They ask. She does not make an appearance in the series, and it is quite possible that Pearl is simply adopted, rather than a product of marriage of power between an elite and a wealthy family. Also, if this theorem were true, it would explain as well why Plankton built a computer wife rather than find one of the trillions of other plankton in the sea. Plankton envies power, and knows that in Bikini Bottom society, the elite and powerful families' lines of breeding become obscured. And how much more of an obscured bloodline could one get than a single-celled creature mixed with a supercomputer? One line of attack against this theorem that we can dismiss outright is the existence of Rock Bottom. Its existence as a separate city with apparently open borders seems to go against the idea of the world of SpongeBob Squarepants consisting of a series of city-states. If they are city-states, say these critics, then why does Rock Bottom not have any sort of protection against Bikini Bottom? If you look at Greek history, you'll see that city-states is something of a misnomer. These polities evolved out of a process called Sinoicism, wherein a number of towns gave up autonomy to a central power. Under Sinoicism, most people did not migrate to the major center, but stayed in their villages of birth. Rock Bottom could be a semi-autonomous village still under the political nexus of the larger city-state of Bikini Bottom, so this does not undermine anything. Still, this theorem does not entirely hold water with me. It begins to sink when one considers the architectural sophistication and general size of Bikini Bottom. Pinning down Bikini Bottom's exact population size is difficult, and one piece of lore that has been given multiple contradictory answers. Its population does not matter so much as in the Kingdom Theorem, which we will explore next, and matters not at all in the Apocalypse Theorem, but is critical here. Greek city-states formed in part out of a massive population growth, particularly in Attica. While a later season gives an exact number of 538, it is out of range of our accepted canon of seasons 1 through 3. Our available evidence with an accepted canon is sparse, variously describing Bikini Bottom as a sprawling metropolis or simply a hick town. The evidence does not necessarily disprove this notion of Bikini Bottom as a large city, which keeps the theorem alive, but neither does it further the case. However, when we look at the architecture, the theorem really starts to look suspect. Take a moment to think about the buildings of Bikini Bottom. They do not appear to possess an advanced form of construction, which one would expect out of a regional power. Everything is made out of recycled trash and things that have fallen into the ocean. An anchor here, a treasure chest there, a pineapple, a tiki head, and so on. If Bikini Bottom were powerful enough to assert political dominance over its region of the ocean, wouldn't we expect to see more in the way of infrastructure? Athens constructed grand palaces and enormous Byzantine structures of walls. We see nothing of the sort in Bikini Bottom to suggest any kind of Atlantean-like power. In fact, we do not even see much evidence that Bikini Bottom is itself the seat of power in the region. The appearance of Atlantis in its original canonical form, Atlantis Squarepants contradicts the original canon, but thankfully appears outside of our accepted time frame, is cited by believers in the City-State Theorem as variously either an analog to Olympus in Greek mythology or a separate, far more powerful city-state. In effect, Bikini Bottom would be the Thebes to Atlantis' Attica, or even an Atlantean colony. But this is simply incongruous. If Bikini Bottom were a city-state, it would be the seat of its own power. Therefore, the mayor, who makes few appearances but is still canon, would be the Basileus or Archon in power. But Atlantis presents Neptune as the king, and he clearly is the king regnant over the citizens of Bikini Bottom and the ultimate authority figure in the land. The fact is, the City-State Theorem rests upon the shaky assumption that Bikini Bottom is the most dominant political force in the area, when the evidence, more often than not, points to it being an insignificant small town.